Hello everyone, today I wanted to go over 10 things that I believe are overlooked before getting into ball python breeding. So number one is cost. You hear that one a lot, but I think people underestimate how much you can actually sink into this. It's going to cost a good amount to get to the levels you want. Every level that you want to step up is going to be an increased cost. But on the flip side, a lot of people really do think that they're going to make a ton of money with this, that they're going to be able to retire, that they're going to be rich. It's probably not going to take over your day job unless you put a lot into it. You should step it up little by little, I think, until you can prove that this can be your day job. But don't underestimate the cost of what it is to get into this, and don't overestimate what you're going to make. Number two is the time that it will take. A lot of people hear that snakes only eat once a week and that you only really have to breed them every so often. You just got to make sure they get some water and clean their poop every now and again. One snake certainly isn't very difficult to take care of in the grand scheme of things, especially when compared to other pets. But when you times that by 30 breeders, the time that I personally wish that I had known about was in terms of that. I started growing my collection with just 5. I literally just had 5 and I was like, I'm just going to dabble. But that collection grew and grew and grew and grew. I have to look at feeding, obviously, which takes a good amount of time. Especially when you feed live, you need to kind of babysit it. I have to look at breeding. I have to make sure I manage the time. I have to set time aside to just think about plans. I have to collect eggs, incubate eggs, and that might be a torpedo because you can kind of sort of plan for when the eggs are coming, but you really don't know exactly when they could come early, they could come late, they could just surprise you, as has happened to me. You could be thinking, hey, I'm gonna go out for dinner, and suddenly you're not, because you have to go collect a bunch of eggs. Based on the size of your collection, you're going to have to put more and more time into it. I used to feed my animals separately across a couple different days. In my mind, I thought that it would save me some time during the day and I wouldn't have to worry about it quite as much. That was a bad decision. I do it all on Mondays now. Basically, just make sure that you manage your time and you don't overwhelm yourself or go beyond your own capacity for time. Number 3, one thing that I wish I knew is that I would be a rodent breeder. I breed far more rodents than I do snakes. I did not plan for that one single bit. But then when I started realizing the costs and things started skyrocketing, especially this last year or two, I started having to keep rats. It started off with me procuring some breeders, and those breeders were on live, so I had to keep the live animals. When you are getting established breeders, sometimes they give you a little bit of trouble getting started for you. They would not eat, so I had some live rats, and I all of a sudden realized I have really nowhere to put these. Thankfully, I had a 10-gallon at the time, so I put these 3 small rats in this 10-gallon. I put dog kibble. Not something I'd recommend necessarily to feed them, but you can. And I put a little teeny water bowl in there, and they wouldn't eat the next week. And then they wouldn't eat the next week. And then the next week I had 10 rats. So I had to start planning and getting different rat enclosures. I bought a little teeny rack, not an actual rat rack. I really need one of those, and had I planned properly, I probably would have started with one of those, but I have my own rack and I put them in tubs on that and I breed maybe 7 or 8 colonies of rats. That takes up more time than the snakes do. And that is an expense that I take on that I could outsource, but it would cost me a lot more money. So that's a personal one, and it might affect you and it might not if you've got the money to just outright buy the rats, but that's an expense then that maybe you weren't planning for. So find out how you're going to feed them. Are you going to just eat the cost, or are you going to breed them yourself? Number 4 on our list is to have a plan. This is referring to breeding. Curb your impulsive nature. You should have some diversity, have some pet projects that you want to do, and I would recommend to kind of also cater to the pet market. But if you're going to focus on investment ball pythons, have a plan. In our most recent video, we talked about how the market really is a recessive market at this point. For better or worse, however you want to feel about it, recessives are the future. And this is, again, speaking from a strictly investment standpoint. Plan your breedings and your direction methodically. I think what you need to do is take a look at the market before you get into this and say, hey, I don't mind getting into small because I want to learn the business, but don't go too big for your britches yet until you know what you want and target what you want. If you want to do sunset, maybe it's better to not buy 5 females with lesser genes in them and instead save that money and put it just towards a Het Sunset or something like that. It's very easy to buy something just because it's available, and I've done this myself. I needed something at the moment, and I bought it at the moment to plug in and do what I needed to do, and that's okay, that's fine. They have achieved that, but now I'm gonna have to move on from them. Since I didn't plan properly, I have to buy their replacements, and then I have to breed up their replacements while I still keep them, because I can't just get rid of them. The replacements will not be ready yet. So plan your breedings, plan your direction. It's okay to switch direction if you want. As long as you have a direction, then you'll do all right. Number 5 would be who to trust. My very first ball python I purchased, I named her Gwen. She was a banana. I didn't know if I wanted to breed at the time, but I wanted a ball python. And I figured it's a female. If I decide to breed, I'll always be able to use a banana female, right? Well, Gwen ended up being a boy. I don't think the person who I bought them from actually tried to screw me. I just don't think that they knew, because it was a reseller. Another thing that has happened to me is that I have bought an adult het. I bought an adult het. I bred this het to a visual form of that heterozygous form, and she laid 8 wonderful eggs. I should have gotten 50% visuals. I got 0. There is a chance that I had the worst luck on the planet, but I very much don't think that that is what happened. Other things that I see people do are not being careful with who they buy from, especially when it comes to either Craigslist or especially when it comes to social media, things like Facebook. Craigslist is an effective source to get animals, but a lot of times people are flipping them. They might not know where it's coming from. You don't necessarily know what you're getting, is for sure. It's not exactly a bad place to look for animals, but I'd just be careful. Facebook might be the worst place. I think that nearly everything that's being sold on Facebook is a scam. It isn't even allowed on their terms of service because of this. You can find hilarious examples of people taking Canovas or Aussies or so many other people's animals, taking their logo off, and then they go to sell it as their own. They post them in such a way that says, hey, here's this animal. If you're interested, message me. Because you can do that on Facebook. You can say, hey, look at these animals I made, message me. This is where it's a slippery slope, because a lot of breeders do say that. They show off a picture of animals, say, hey, they're going to be available. Honestly, I think a lot of people need to get in the practice of is, hey, here's a picture of my animals. They're going to be on my morph market. That way you go to the morph market. I think it's okay to inquire and talk about animals on Facebook, but don't purchase them and don't send any money to people on Facebook. Number 6 would be how to properly sex an animal. It is incredibly difficult to sex an adult. Probing is necessary, and popping of young ones or probing them is fine too. The absolute foolproof way is to probe them. There are plenty of tutorials online. We'll probably do one day ourselves as well, but learn how to sex your snake, whether you're popping them to get the hemipenes to come out to determine if it's a male, or how to probe them, and you'll avoid a lot of these issues yourself. Again, you can probably trust most big breeders, at least at their word. If you buy the animal and you really just want to probe it later, these people have a huge reputation to take care of. So as long as you're not trying to screw them and switch the animal or something like that, because they're gonna know if you try that. If you pop it and get home and it's a male and they made a mistake, let them know. They will rectify the mistake, because mistakes do happen. So don't think people are trying to fool people. If I put 2 bull pythons on the table right next to each other that are newborns, you will not know the difference. There's no tail difference on these animals. Even in king snakes and stuff like that, where that is true, that is also never a 100% way to determine things. Always learn how to probe and pop your snakes. If I had known how to sex animals and done it myself, especially since when I got Gwen, he was younger, I could have popped the animal and said, nope, this is a boy. At the very least, learn how to probe it, taking the proper precautions to not hurt your animal, of course, and you will save yourself a lot of heartache. Plus, you'll save yourself a big bill, because the only other way would be to go to the vet, and that's going to be costly. The number 7 thing that I wish that I knew was how much space this would take up. Racks are big. You never really properly know until you're in it. You don't know how quickly you can grow. On that, maybe you should control how quickly you grow. I kind of just thought, you know, I'm just gonna have some racks in here, and it ended up taking up an entire room. I kind of just thought maybe it would be the back of one room, the whole room. My office is a snake room. A lot of people just aren't really thinking about it, because I certainly wasn't. I got a rack of 5 at first, and then it was 10, and it was 15, 20, 25, 30, and so on. But when you've got 30 breeders going, with it comes the necessity to upgrade your hatchling racks. If you have 30 snakes, 10 of them are males, 20 of them are females, and let's just say all of them go. Let's follow the law of average here. 6 times 20, that's 120 babies. Do you have the room? You should plan to always have a little bit extra, and that even includes with your breeders. Sometimes you find an animal that's hard to pass on, and you need to leverage leverage your impulsive nature with the fact that maybe this is a good deal that you shouldn't pass up on. And if you don't have the room, then you can't expand. Always have a little bit of extra. So plan your space and plan a bit more. Number 8 would be tracking. You need to keep records, sales and costs and losses, because you can leverage all that, especially when you start having to pay the good old government. We call this a profit and loss statement in business. This is how you avoid paying a bunch of taxes when you also lost money. A loss for me, or an expense I should say, would be when I have to leverage rats, because despite the fact that I breed rats, I still don't have enough quite often, and I need to go get some. That is a cost to me, and I can use that to offset taxes. You'll certainly need to track the breeding of your animal. People are going to want to know certain things about it. When were they born? At the very least, I think that you should know the month and year that that animal was born. I have a sheet where I'm tracking the actual animal and when the eggs laid and when they hatched. I keep that for if I ever decide to move on from the animal, so I can release that information to the next owner of that breeder. I do this with all of my females mostly. The males I mostly just track to make sure that they had been breeding and eating properly as well. You're going to want to track what you got from these animals, and especially when feeding the hatchlings, you're going to need to make sure that you're especially watching them, because you need to establish a track record of them eating, because you're selling these to people and they're going to want to know this information. They should want to know this information at the very least. What were they eating? How much? When I got into this, it was again just 5, so I really didn't think I needed to do it too much. I've been doing this on Excel. It's an okay method, but again, it's something maybe I should have just gone one of these like Husbandry Pros, something like that. There's plenty of tracking apps out there that maybe I should have gotten a program and done something like that and started from the get-go. But now I almost feel like I'm gonna have to put a lot of work into swapping all my information into it and finding a system that works for you. Even if it is Excel, that's fine. Just make sure that you do it. Certainly isn't something a mistake that I necessarily made, but I probably would do things a little differently now that I know. Something that you definitely at least need to do. Track everything. Number 9 would be don't underestimate males. A lot of people say this is a female game, and there's certainly some merit to that, because yes, a female can lay 6 eggs and those 6 eggs will probably prove her worth no matter what, even if she was a normal. But I would argue that you should buy males that are far more powerful, that are genetic powerhouses. Your males should be your visuals, quite frankly, because they're going to pass everything on. If I buy a visual clown, and if I cheap out on the male and buy a het clown, as I'm getting more females, that male can only maybe pass the gene of clown. If I had swapped that up and bought a het clown female, I would have paid less for 1, and 2, the clown male would also be less because he's a male. I can now breed him to multiple things and always pass the gene of clown on. I'm not saying that you should cheap out on your female at all. I think that people just need to stop thinking of it as a female game. I think it's both. You should focus on your females at first because you're growing them up, unless of course you're buying established breeders already. But when it comes time to get your male, don't cheap out. I bought an Enchi possible super pastel pied, and this is to go to a certain project that I wanted to run. Long story short, why didn't I just get something a little bit more powerful? This snake cost me at the time maybe $500 or so. I could have spent a bit more and got something a bit more of a powerhouse that now stays around for a lot longer, because once I've used this male to hit what I want, I don't need him anymore and I'm just going to move on from him. You want to keep moving animals in and out? They usually drop their value a little bit as time goes on. So why not just invest a little bit more from the get-go so you can use this male a bit longer? Don't cheap out on your males. Definitely invest in a powerhouse or 2 or 3, and don't overwhelm them either. Some people get a powerhouse and they're like, I gotta put it to everything. That poor boy is going to work himself to oblivion, and you could actually cause some health issues to the snake. It's not like he's gonna do it to death, but in a way they can stop eating. They can develop a lot more stress because they're in there with the girl all the time, and they do kind of compete for the heat. They're mostly solitary animals, so don't overwhelm them, pace it properly, and get good males. And the number 10 thing that I see people make mistakes with is marketing. This includes social media, this includes branding, it includes banners, it includes logos, it includes business cards, it includes presentation, and it includes how you present yourself. You're the face of the business. How you market yourself is incredibly important. Marketing is not just an advertisement tool. Earlier I talked about who to trust. This directly links to marketing. If nobody knows you, they're going to doubt you. They're not going to trust you. You put yourself out there in some way and you learn to talk to people at least a little bit. Because if you don't put yourself out there, then no one's going to know who you are and they're not going to buy from you, especially when they can buy practically the same stuff from someone else for maybe just a little bit more. They're going to just spend the extra money so that they have that peace of mind. Peace of mind is an incredibly valuable thing. I get it. People have social anxiety. You don't need to do a bunch. You don't need to do YouTube necessarily, although I think it would benefit you a lot to do YouTube. And there's more methods than what I'm doing. I would not have the time to do what I'm doing if it wasn't for my brother being the editor and basically runner of this channel. I kind of favor Facebook myself, mostly just because it's kind of what I'm more familiar with. We have an Instagram. We even have a website, which we mostly use to throw links on to other stuff. Put yourself on Morph Market and go to shows. Start doing expos. Talk to people so that they can get to know you and get your name out there. It will start slow because people don't know who to trust. And can you blame them? That's just something you are going to have to combat. And that is the #1 way to do it. Market yourself and get over some social anxieties that you might have. And it's a good thing anyways, because there are so many cool people to meet in this hobby. So many more than the bad people that you might hear about. If you liked this video, you can actually check out our video on how to start a ball python business right here.